The feast in the great hall of the royal castle was as noisy as a storm. Roast piglets smoked on long tables, jugs filled to the brim glistened in the light of torches, and the air was thick with the smell of meat and spices. Servants rushed about, pouring wine and serving dishes. The queen sat at a carved table under a canopy, surrounded by court ladies and noble knights. Everyone tried to smile, but their smiles seemed forced. Everyone remembered the rumors. Last week, a poisoned cup had been served in a neighboring principality, and now the entire court lived in fear. Among those serving at the feast was the cook, Martha. Almost no one noticed her. She carried dishes, adjusted the sauce in the bowls, and quickly brushed away crumbs. To the courtiers, she was just part of the furniture. But Martha had an eye for detail. She knew what fresh meat looked like, and how light played on clear wine. And so that evening, she noticed something that no one else saw. When the dark silver cup was placed in front of the queen, Martha caught a strange glint. It was not the glint of wine or the reflection of fire, but a murky spark at the very edge. She had seen something similar once, when rat-catchers were preparing poison for bait in the kitchen. Then the liquid left the same thin trace on the metal. Martha felt her throat go dry. No one knew that in her youth she had helped an apothecary and knew how to distinguish between potions. She had hidden this knowledge so as not to arouse suspicion. But now it was this knowledge that told her. The wine in the cup was dangerous. Her hands were shaking, but she stepped forward and, as if by mistake, knocked over the fruit tray. Apples scattered across the floor, and at that moment she snatched the cup. The servants gasped, the knights jumped up, but the cup ended up in the hands of a simple cook. She poured the wine onto the stone floor. The liquid left a dark stain, as if the earth had absorbed blood. Silence fell over the hall. People did not understand what had happened. Martha lowered her eyes and said that the wine was not pure. She knew that after such words she could be accused of slander or of having replaced the cup herself. But she had no choice. The guards rushed to the table, shouting began, and the queen turned pale. The advisers exchanged glances. No one believed that a simple woman could have noticed the poison. And now, dear viewers, I want to welcome you. Thank you for listening to this story. Write in the comments where you are watching this video from. I would be interested to know. I hope you enjoy listening. The feast turned into chaos. All eyes turned to the cook. Some whispered that she should be arrested immediately. Others said that she might have saved the queen's life. The servants stood frozen. The court ladies covered their faces with handkerchiefs. The queen, still trembling, ordered Martha to be brought to her. The servants dragged her to the dais. The woman in a simple dress, her hands smelling of bread and onions, stood opposite her mistress in her crown and silks. Martha repeated, "There was poison in the cup." She couldn't explain how she knew, but she insisted on it. The advisers began to argue. Some demanded that the cook be executed for her audacity, while others suggested testing the cup. The court physician was brought in. He dripped from the cup into a bowl of bread, and the bread turned black. Now no one had any doubts. The poison was real. The cook stood, not daring to raise her eyes. She understood that she had miraculously escaped death. But she did not know that this incident would change not only her life, but the fate of the entire kingdom. As the hall filled with noise and gossip, Martha noticed one of the knights. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed his fear. He was staring too intently at the empty cup. Martha realized that the conspirator was nearby, but no one else had guessed it yet. After the poison was confirmed, the feast finally fell apart. People scattered to the corners, some secretly leaving the hall so as not to be near the cup, which had become evidence. The queen ordered the doors to be closed, and the heavy doors slammed shut with a bang. No one was to leave until the culprit was found. Guards lined up along the walls. The advisers spoke quietly, but their words sounded threatening. Everyone understood that the hunt was about to begin, and the first thing they turned their attention to was the cook. After all, she was the one who touched the cup. She was the first to mention the poison. Martha lowered her head and prepared for the worst, but the doctor confirmed that traces of poison had also been found on the stone. Without the cook's intervention, the poison would have reached the queen. That was enough to clear her of suspicion. But it did not increase the court's trust in her. The queen looked at her for a long time, as if trying to see something more than just a simple servant. Martha felt a strange excitement in response. She herself did not understand why her mistress's gaze seemed to recognize her. While this was happening, Martha noticed that the knight in the dark green cloak kept looking away. He did not shout or speak, but the tension on his face grew. She remembered that he was the first to propose a toast to the queen's health, and the cup with the poison was right in front of her. No one listened to the cook, but she knew that if she remained silent, the conspiracy would remain in the shadows. She decided to approach the physician and quietly tell him that he should pay attention to that knight. The physician frowned and whispered to the adviser, who then loudly announced that it was worth questioning those sitting nearby. The knight turned pale, but tried to hide it with a smile. He said he was grateful for the cook's help, but that the accusations against him were offensive. His voice sounded firm, and many believed him. However, at that moment, Martha noticed that he clenched his fist so tightly that his fingers turned white. While the guards were examining the neighbors' cups, a commotion broke out in the hall. One of the young servants suddenly rushed to the doors. He was caught and thrown to the floor. A packet of powder was found in his pocket, the same powder that had been used to poison the cup. The crowd erupted in shouts. Everyone decided that he was the culprit. Martha looked at the young man. He was trembling and insisted that it wasn't his, but no one believed him. The queen ordered that he be questioned later. The boy was taken away in front of everyone. Martha felt that it was all too simple. The servant could have been framed, and the knight in green now looked calmer, too calm, as if everything had gone according to his plan. She knew that if she remained silent, it would not only be the servant who would perish. People much higher up were involved in the conspiracy, but she had no proof. When the feast was finally over, the cook was left aside. She helped clear the tables as if nothing had happened. But one thought kept running through her head. That knight was hiding something, and if she was right, there would be another attempt. That night, Martha couldn't sleep for a long time in her small room next to the kitchen. The cup with its cloudy glow kept appearing before her eyes. She remembered the knight's gaze and the trembling servant. Anxiety grew in her chest. The next morning, she was summoned to the queen. The woman in silk sat by the window and said that Martha had saved her life. The queen admitted that she did not know whom to trust at court. She asked the cook to tell her everything she had noticed. Martha hesitated. Any word could be turned against her. But she said she suspected the knight in green. The queen frowned. He was one of her old comrades in arms. However, she promised to keep an eye on him. The cook was about to leave when the queen suddenly added, there was something familiar in her eyes. She said that Martha reminded her of someone from the past. The words sounded mysterious, and the cook's heart skipped a beat. She did not understand what exactly her mistress meant, but for the first time she felt that her fate was much more closely connected with the queen than she had thought. The court lived in anxiety. After the failed poisoning, every step became suspicious. Knights began to carry their own cups with them, and ladies only accepted food from servants they had known since childhood. But the tension only grew. Martha returned to her usual work in the kitchen. She thought that after what had happened, her life would change, but no one was in a hurry to thank her. Most believed that she had simply noticed the poison by accident. To them, the cook remained just a woman in a stained apron. But Mara had a gift for seeing what others missed, and it was this gift that gave her another sign. A few days later, she had to take a basket of bread to the armory. The knights were standing there, including the one in the green cloak. He was talking to another man, but when Martha entered, they fell silent. On the table between them lay a package with a wax seal. The men hurriedly put it away. She couldn't hear their words, but she understood from their expressions that they were talking about a conspiracy. In the evening, she decided to tell the doctor everything. He was cautious and did not rush to believe her. He said that she should keep quiet, otherwise she would risk her life. But Martha insisted, and then he admitted that he had long suspected a secret alliance among the nobility. He asked her to be his eyes in the kitchen, so the cook, accustomed only to bread and herbs, became part of a dangerous game. One night she was awakened by a knock. Standing at the door was the very young servant who had been accused of poisoning. His face was bruised. He begged her to hide him for at least a couple of hours. Martha let him in, even though she knew she could get hurt. The boy said that the knights had put the poison in his pocket without his knowledge. He swore that he had seen someone slip the package into his pocket, and that among those knights was a man in a green cloak. Martha realized that her guess was correct, but now she had only the word of one servant, and the entire nobility would be against her. She decided not to betray the boy. She hid him in the storeroom and said she would help him escape in the morning. But at night, an alarm went off in the castle. Someone had broken into the queen's chambers. Hearing the bell ring, Martha ran out into the corridor. People were running towards the tower. She grabbed a knife lying on the table and ran with them. At the queen's chambers, the guards were fighting two unknown assailants. One of them was killed, the other escaped. The queen was alive but frightened. In the crowd, Martha noticed the knight in green again. His face remained calm, but she saw a drop of blood on his hand. No one else noticed it. She couldn't keep quiet. But how could she tell anyone? No one would believe a cook. Later that night, the queen summoned Martha again. She said she felt trapped, that even among her close friends there were traitors. Martha made up her mind and told her everything about the night. The queen listened in silence. When the cook finished, the queen said something unexpected. She confessed that Martha reminded her of her late sister, and that this sister once had a daughter whose fate was unknown. The queen's words were spoken quietly, but something stirred in the cook's heart. For the first time she wondered, what if she herself was not just the daughter of a peasant woman? The queen said no more, but asked Martha to stay close. From that day on, the cook no longer just cleared the table. She walked alongside the queen, watching every movement of those around her. In the days that followed, Martha found herself drawn into court life more deeply than she could ever have imagined. She no longer just cleaned vegetables and watched over the dough, but stood near the queen when she received ambassadors and advisors. People wondered why a simple cook was so close, but no one dared to openly object. Martha kept watching the knight in the green cloak. He knew how to keep his cool. He said the right words, smiled, and bowed his head in respect. But behind these gestures lay coldness. She saw him whispering too often with a foreign merchant who had arrived at the court, and every time they noticed Martha, they abruptly interrupted their conversation. She hardly slept at night. The servant she had hidden was still hiding in her room. He helped her with the housework, but he was trembling with fear all the time. Martha understood that if he was found, she would also be accused, but she couldn't abandon him. One night she heard a rustle. The servant was sitting by the door and whispered that he had seen a shadow near the kitchen. When they looked out, they noticed someone with a bag over his head creeping towards the castle gates. Martha decided to follow him. They walked quietly through the corridors. In a dark corner by the gate, the knight in green handed the bag to the same stranger. Martha noticed the glint of a dagger. The servant almost cried out, but she covered his mouth. The next morning, she went to the doctor and told him everything. He was silent for a long time, then said that it was now clear that the conspiracy was wider than they had thought, and that if the knight's name was revealed, many of the nobility would be implicated. Martha understood that her word meant little, but unexpectedly, help came from where she least expected it. An old knight arrived at the castle, who had long been retired and rarely appeared at court. He was a friend of the queen's late father and was well respected. He said he had heard about the cook's actions at the banquet and wanted to meet her. When they were alone, he told her that he recognized in her the features of his old friend, the sister of the current queen. He said that he had once helped hide this woman's child from her enemies. His words sounded as if he knew exactly who Martha was. She sat in a daze. If this was true, then she was not just a simple servant. It meant that her blood was connected to the queen herself. The old knight asked her to keep quiet for now. He said it was too early to reveal the truth. Otherwise, their enemies would strike first. But now she understood. Her life and the fate of the court were intertwined. Meanwhile, anxiety in the castle only grew. People whispered about the servant who had never been found. Some suspected that he had run away. Martha hid the truth, knowing that if he were found, there would be no mercy for either of them. And then, one evening, while the queen was dining in her chamber, Martha noticed that strange glow again. But now, it was not in the cup, but in the plate of meat. She rushed forward and knocked the dish to the floor. The meat fell, and small shards lay nearby. The queen turned pale. Tests showed that the piece of meat had been poisoned. The conspirators did not stop. They looked for new ways. Everyone understood that if they were not caught now, the next attempt could be the last. After the second poisoning attempt, the entire castle turned into a fortress of suspicion. The queen ordered the guards at her doors to be doubled. Her table was now checked several times before each meal. But fear was everywhere, and no one knew where the next strike would come from. Martha felt that they were running out of time. She understood that the enemy would not stop until the queen was dead, and more often she caught the eye of the knight in green. He seemed to be enjoying the chaos, as if he himself were pulling the strings. The servant she was hiding told her that he had overheard a conversation in the cellars. They were talking about a secret passage behind the kitchen wall through which anything could be carried. Martha decided to check it out. At night, she and the boy went downstairs. In the damp stone behind the wine barrels, they found a narrow door leading to a dark passageway. It smelled of herbs and metal. There were traces of powder on the floor. Now they had proof. The poison was being brought in secretly. But it was dangerous to report this to the queen. Martha knew that an accusation without specific names would turn against her. Unexpectedly, the old knight came to her again. He said he understood that she was in danger, and that her enemies were surely already suspicious of her for knowing too much. He offered to take her out of the castle, but Martha refused. She said that until the conspiracy was uncovered, she could not leave. Then, the old man promised to support her before the queen. The next day, the council gathered in the great hall. There, they were to decide the fate of the detained servant. He was to be executed for conspiracy. The crowd demanded blood to calm their fears. Martha couldn't take it anymore. She stepped forward and said that the young man was innocent, that she herself had seen how the poison had been planted on him. There was an uproar in the hall. The councillors shouted that the cook was lying, that she was protecting a criminal. The knight in green stood up and declared that this woman was meddling in matters that were none of her business. But the queen stopped the argument. She remembered how Martha had saved her twice. She ordered an investigation. This decision saved the young man from execution, but intensified the nobles' hatred of the cook. Now they saw her as a threat. After the meeting, the knight in green approached her in the corridor. His words were cold. He said that not every servant lives to see the morning if she talks too much. His eyes flashed so fiercely that Martha understood he was ready to kill her at the first opportunity. That same night, Martha hid a knife under her mattress and did not sleep a wink. She knew that now the game was not only for the queen's life, but also for her own. But amid the fear, there was also light. The queen called her to her more and more often, and whispered that she felt a strange kinship. She remembered her sister, who had disappeared many years ago, and whispered that Mara had the same eyes. These words warmed the cook's heart and gave her the strength to fight on. Meanwhile, downstairs, in secret passages, enemies were preparing a new attack, and Martha sensed that she would soon have to face them head-on. With each passing day, Martha felt the noose tightening around her. Even those who had been friendly to her before began to avoid her in the kitchen. People whispered behind her back that she was a witch, that she herself was sending poison so that she could then supposedly save the queen. These words did not arise on their own. Someone was spreading them deliberately. The servant she was hiding told her that he had overheard a conversation between two knights. They said that if the cook did not keep quiet, she would be accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake. Martha realized that she had very little time left. That same night, she went to the doctor again. He listened to her and said that the only way to survive was to reveal the truth to everyone. She needed to catch the conspirators red-handed. To do this, he suggested setting a trap, replacing the queen's cup, and watching to see who would try to poison it. Martha agreed. The next day, everything was ready. The queen's cup was left on the table, but it contained only water. Martha watched from behind a column, and she saw. The knight in green approached, leaned over, and quickly threw a pinch of powder into the cup. He was sure that no one had noticed, but Martha stepped forward and picked up the cup. Shouts rang out in the hall. The knight tried to justify himself, saying that it was a mistake, that he wanted to set an example for the servants. But at that moment, the doctor brought the cup to the dog standing at the entrance. The animal licked the water and fell dead a few minutes later. The hall was filled with a buzz. The guards grabbed the knight. but he broke free and rushed towards the queen with a dagger. Everyone froze, but then Martha, without hesitation, rushed forward. She stabbed him with a knife she had hidden under her apron. The knight fell. The cook saved the queen for the third time. After that, everyone was forced to admit that she was right. But the story did not end there. Before he died, the knight managed to whisper some strange words. He said that he was not alone, that the real mastermind behind the conspiracy was still in the palace. These words hit everyone like a bucket of cold water. So the danger was not over, and Martha felt that the conspiracy was deeper than she had thought. That evening, the queen summoned her. She said she could no longer remain silent. She was certain that Martha was the daughter of her deceased sister. Once upon a time, the girl had been taken away from the castle to save her from the rebels. Since then, there had been no news of her, but the eyes and facial features were too similar. Martha stood in silence. She had always considered herself the daughter of a poor woman who had died in the fields. Now the truth was revealed to her. She belonged to the bloodline that ruled the kingdom. But with this came a new burden. If rumors of her origins came out, enemies could use it against her, and those who hated the queen would have a new reason for unrest. The queen asked her to keep the secret, but she promised that she would always be there for her. For the first time, Martha felt that her life would never be the same again. She was no longer just a cook. She had become part of the royal bloodline and had a new goal: to see the conspiracy through to the end. After the knight's death, the Green Castle was plunged into tense silence for a while. Everyone expected the story to end there, but the dying man's words that he was only serving someone higher up did not give them peace. No one knew who to trust. Martha continued to work alongside the queen. Now she no longer looked like a simple servant. Even those who had recently despised her respected her. But respect was mixed with fear. Many understood that she knew too much, and that made her dangerous. The servant she was still hiding told her that he had overheard new conversations. They said that one of the advisors was secretly meeting with people outside the castle. Martha decided to follow him. At night, she and the boy walked through a secret passage that began behind the kitchen. In the narrow corridor, they heard voices. One of them was familiar, an advisor close to the queen. He said it was time to act quickly, before the fear subsided. Another voice insisted that the cook must also be eliminated, otherwise all their efforts would be in vain. Martha gritted her teeth. Now the conspiracy was obvious, but to come out and accuse the advisor directly meant certain death. Half of the nobility supported him. The next morning, the queen noticed the fatigue in Mara's eyes and asked what had happened. She was silent for a long time, but then she made up her mind and told her. The queen turned pale. She admitted that she had long suspected this man, but without evidence, she could do nothing. In the evening, they decided to conduct a test. The advisor was supposed to bring a new tax document. The queen ordered Martha to watch the paper closely. And indeed, a barely discernible trace of powder was visible on the edge of the parchment. If the queen had taken the scroll in her hands, the poison would have penetrated her skin. Now they had proof, but the advisor was too powerful to be arrested without consequences. The queen ordered silence until they gathered more evidence. Martha felt that everything was leading to a decisive confrontation. Meanwhile, the old knight came to her again. He said that the truth about her origins could no longer be hidden. After all, if the conspirators found out first, They would use her secret against the queen herself. He suggested openly calling her the lady's niece, and thus strengthening trust in her. Martha hesitated. She was afraid that this would cause turmoil, but deep down, she knew that sooner or later the truth would come out. At night, she heard a rustle in her room again. The servant jumped up first. A man with a dagger stood in the shadows. A fight ensued. Martha managed to grab an iron poker and strike the assassin's hand. The dagger fell, and the uninvited guest fled into the corridor. Now it was clear, the enemy was not waiting for the trial. He was taking action. And if Martha did not get ahead of him, by morning there might be neither the queen nor herself. After the attack in her room, Martha realized that there was nowhere left to hide. The enemy knew every corner of the castle and was ready to kill without hesitation. She decided to act first. The next day, she went to the doctor and told him about the night attack. He said that they needed to join forces, otherwise they would be destroyed one by one. The doctor suggested searching the secret passages thoroughly, and that's where they found what turned everything upside down. Behind the old wall, where a narrow tunnel stretched, there was a hiding place. In it were scrolls with the advisor's seals. They contained plans describing exactly how to slip in the poison, which people should replace the guards, and even a list of those who should be eliminated after the queen's death. Among the names was that of the cook. These papers were direct evidence, but if they were brought before the council, half of the nobility would rise up in support of the advisor. He was too influential, and many owed him their positions and lands. The queen said she needed time, but there was no time. A new banquet was to be held that evening, at which the advisor was to give a speech. Everyone felt that this was when he would try to bring the matter to a conclusion. Martha insisted that she must be present. The queen hesitated but agreed. She knew that her sister's niece was not just a cook, but now her support. In the evening, the hall was filled with noise again. People ate, drank, and laughed, but there was tension in the air. The advisor stood up and began to talk about the future of the kingdom, about the need for a new order, about the weak giving way to the strong. Martha saw his hand slip toward the cup. She knew what was about to happen. But before he could do anything, an old knight entered the hall. He was holding the scrolls found in the hiding place. His voice was loud and firm. He said he had evidence of treason. The hall buzzed. The advisor turned pale, but tried to shout that the papers were forged. Then, the doctor showed traces of poison on the edges of the parchment. The advisor realized that it was all over and tried to run away, but the guards caught him. The crowd demanded justice. At that moment, many eyes turned to Martha. Everyone remembered that she had saved the queen 3 times, that it was her observation and courage that had exposed the conspirators. And then, the queen stood up and said, "This woman is not just a cook. She is the daughter of her deceased sister and her niece." The hall gasped. People looked at Martha with surprise and fear. Some whispered that it was impossible. Others saw the features of the royal family in her face. Martha stood in a simple dress and felt the world around her crumbling. She could no longer hide her origins. Now, she had to not only prove her innocence, but also accept a new role on which the future of the entire kingdom depended. After the advisor's exposure, the hall was filled with noise. Some shouted that the cook should take her place next to the queen, while others feared that her origins would cause unrest. But at that moment, only the queen herself could decide. She stood up and said that now the truth was known. Her niece had lived among the common people for many years. and that was what made her eyes sharper and her heart more honest than those of many nobles. She said she trusted Martha more than anyone else. But while the crowd argued, the guards led the advisor away. He did not resist, only smiled a strange smile. And before he was taken away, he uttered words that made the hall fall silent again. He said that death was near, and that poison had long since found its way into the castle. These words hung over everyone like a shadow. The queen ordered his chambers to be searched. There they found more scrolls, bags of powder, and letters to foreign rulers. It became clear that he was preparing not only murder, but also a coup. Martha did not sleep all night. She sat by the window and thought about how strangely her life had turned. Not long ago, she had been kneading dough in the kitchen, and now people's lives depended on her decisions. The servant she was still hiding approached her and said he was ready to leave so as not to bring trouble upon himself. But Martha said she would not abandon him. She knew that without him, many secrets would remain hidden. In the morning, the queen convened the council again, this time without the advisor, but with the knights and guards. She announced that Martha was officially recognized as her niece and confidant. This caused a storm of emotions, but no one dared to object aloud. After the meeting, a foreign ambassador arrived at the castle. He demanded a meeting with the queen. Martha noticed that this man was the same merchant with whom the knight in green often whispered. She immediately understood that the conspiracy was not yet over. During the negotiations, the ambassador spoke of trade and friendship, but his eyes wandered as if he were waiting for a sign. Martha felt that he might be the last link in the chain. At night, she went back to the secret passage. There, she overheard a conversation between the ambassador and two people from the castle. One of them was a guard, the other a servant from the kitchen. They discussed that the poison had already been mixed into the flour and wine supplies, and that in the morning it would be served to all the nobles at once. Martha turned pale. This plan was far more terrible than the murder of one queen. It was an attempt on the entire court. She returned to the queen and told her everything. The queen ordered an urgent inspection of the storerooms. Sure enough, part of the supplies had been poisoned. This discovery finally dispelled all doubts. The ambassador and his accomplices were arrested. Upon learning of this in his cell, the advisor lost even his last hope. But Martha understood that victory had not yet been achieved. It was necessary not only to catch the enemies, but also to restore trust in the castle and bring peace back to the people. She felt that the decisive day would come tomorrow. The morning of that day began with the heavy ringing of bells. The guards gathered the entire court in the castle courtyard. The people stood tensely. Everyone wanted to hear how the story of the poisonings and the conspiracy would end. The queen stepped out onto the balcony, with Martha standing next to her. Her simple dress looked modest, but now everyone saw her not only as a cook, but as a woman who had saved the queen's life 3 times and uncovered a whole network of traitors. First, the advisor was brought out. He tried to say that he had been forced, that his allies had betrayed him. But the people knew. The papers and poison in his chambers left no doubt. He was sentenced to death. The crowd met this with silence. Then, the foreign ambassador and his accomplices were brought out. Their guilt was obvious. They faced exchange or imprisonment, but most importantly, their conspiracy had been foiled. After that, the queen said aloud what few people already knew. Martha was her niece, the daughter of her deceased sister. She told how many years ago the girl had been taken from the castle to save her, and how she had grown up among the common people, and that this was precisely what had allowed her to remain honest and sharp-eyed. Many gasped, but no one dared to object. It was too obvious that without her, the kingdom would now lie in ruins. The queen announced that from now on, Martha would be her confidant and protector. Not knights, not advisors, but the one they were used to ignoring. At first, the crowd was silent, then shouts of approval rang out. People saw justice in this. A simple woman, despised and invisible, turned out to be stronger than all the nobles. Martha stood next to the queen and felt her heart tremble. She did not seek power or dream of honors, but fate had put her where she needed to be, and she had succeeded. Later, when the square was empty, she returned to the kitchen. Everything was as it had been before: bread in the oven, pots on the fire. She smiled, for it was here that her journey had begun. The servant she had saved now helped her openly. He became her faithful assistant. The old knight supported her and said that justice had finally prevailed. In the evening, the queen summoned her to her chambers. They sat by the window, and the queen said she was grateful to fate for finding her niece. She added that the future of the kingdom was now in safe hands. Martha listened and understood that life would never return to its former simplicity. But she had no regrets. She knew that if she had to choose again, she would go back to the kitchen, see the sparkle in the cup, and decide to intervene. Thus, a simple cook, whose name was forgotten at the feast, became the woman who saved the queen and the entire kingdom.